And we're live and we're gossiping while we're going live.
We are gossiping. Did
So
you
that's fine. And
hear
my
about it?
glasses, I've got these reading glasses on, and I'm terribly sorry. Anyway, my eyesight journey at this time is a total disaster, and I've got contacts in because I went running earlier, and so now I have these reading glasses on, but they have a tremendous glare, but I can't see the screen very well without them. So anyway, I'm going to leave them on, but it's just maybe I'll turn this light off there. Maybe that's better. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I have a pretty bad glare with my glasses too, but I'm blind without
I'm
them.
totally blind. I'm
I
absolutely blind.
cannot.
So anyway, so sorry if I look weird or you can't see my
We
eyes,
really
but
need to go to the healing rooms at Bethel Church and just get our eyes fixed.
no, that would be great. I should have, I never got LASIK when I was like kind of eligible for it. Now I think it's too late because my eyes like got worse every year and they're supposed to be like stable for I think 2 years before you get that. Anyway, I'm just eyesight is not my gifting apparently. So I don't have good so anyway, okay, all that to say. So we are back. Keri is back. We had such a great conversation last time that we decided to do it again. She's got some questions for me. I have some questions for her. So we're going to start with her topic, and we're going to exhaust that, and then I'm going to keep an eye on the time, and we're going to switch halfway through, and then I'm gonna tell her about something and get her take on it.
Well, hopefully
And
people aren't too exhausted. Saying that I'm going to exhaust a topic.
no, we're going to exhaust the topic, not the audience or each other. So,
Ideally,
yeah,
ideally.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. So anyway, Keri, so you start. You sent me an email and you had some questions, and we've talked a little bit about it. But go ahead and start with your questions for me.
Yeah, so, growing up in Southern Baptist churches and going to GAs every week in Sunday school and you that just got you to smile, huh? Um, Also having missionaries come and visit the church and give their fundraising talks while they're on furlough, there was always this sense, and sometimes it was very explicit, that they are having to defy the government of the country that they're in because the government is hostile to Christianity. Now, my understanding at this point in my life is that there are some horrific authoritarian brutal regimes that are hostile to like anyone and anything. And there's also a lot of well-intentioned governments that might have some corruption inside them, but also they see what's going on with American missionaries, and they see some destabilizing practices, and they just don't really want that in their countries. But my concern is how this idea that there are governments around the world that are hostile to Christianity, at least hostile to American evangelical missionaries, might have contributed to current attitudes that so many MAGA evangelicals have towards our own government.
Yeah, so I think this is really a complex issue because Um, so my experience in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa is kind of the opposite. Like we have brutal dictators, but they're all Christian. They're all good Christian dictators, brutal dictators. Like
Oh,
you're
that
wearing
that
the
actually is
70
a
of you.
thing.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. I grew up under Daniel Arap Moy, who had been educated by American missionaries, loved American missionaries, actually had a group of missionaries, including my parents, over at his house for a meal. Loved came regularly to visit my school, my American evangelical boarding school. I met him on a few different occasions. Um, and he was a brutal dictator, but a very good Christian.
That's
Funny, huh?
good. At least
Um,
he's going to
so
heaven when he dies, right?
well, he is dead now, and
Oh,
that remains to be seen. And then all of Kenya's subsequent presidents. I mean, Kenya is a very heavily Christian, very devoutly Christian, very evangelical Christian. country as a whole. And many sub-Saharan African countries, you also have not just in sub-Saharan Africa, but around the world, after independence in particular, you had a lot of countries seeing American missionaries as a good way to get development and education, like the Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, for instance, like actively, got all the missionaries he could because they, would set up schools, and that was basically became, a backbone of Ethiopia's educational system. And so that's kind of my experience in Africa. The countries that would be hostile would be predominantly Muslim countries. I don't know of any sort of, I guess Russia would be an example of a Christian, like Orthodox. They have their Orthodox church, but they're quite hostile to other kinds of Christians, including evangelical Christians, which probably would be surprising to a lot of American evangelicals who, Russia has cultivated this narrative on the American right of being this Christian nation. And a lot of American evangelicals have bought into that idea, or Hungary being another example, under Orban, RIP, political RIP there. But they've bought into this idea that these are sort of Christian nations because they agree with them on gender roles and LGBTQ and all of these things. But in fact, like Putin locks up evangelical Christians, like they are really persecuted there. Yeah, but most of the countries I am aware of that are hostile to missionaries would be Muslim countries. And of course, in a lot of those countries, they're not allowed in as missionaries. And there's a phenomenon of the undercover missionary,
The tent
where,
makers.
yeah, where they go on a platform. They go on they go as someone else, as something else, and they get a work visa on the basis of doing, and oftentimes they actually do those jobs. They'll have like a store or like school, or they teach English, or what have you. But they're actually there to secretly proselytize. And those missionaries I would say, they're like an uber sexy class of missionaries. People love those stories, and they love, oh, there's a whole, as coming from the intelligence world, it kind of cracks me up because, like my mother, so when we would talk on the phone about people who that we knew who were in Muslim countries, she would just on the like she my mother's in America and I'm in America, okay? And we're talking about, and she would like use all this code. She wouldn't say the word Muslim. She would say, "Yes, they met an M the other day, who is interested in," and then she would say like, there's this whole code, and they love all that stuff. It's very sexy and glam. It makes them feel very
Yeah,
important.
well, listen, I lived in Amman, Jordan for 3.5 years. I was mostly doing humanitarian work, and I went to Arabic school for.
Humanitarian work.
Yeah, I mean, I should have been a missionary because I could have been just platformed like crazy, but instead I was broke AF and couldn't afford a taxi, so I had to walk to language school. Um, but yeah, there were a lot of, man, the infrastructure that missionaries in Amman had created for their own selves was astounding. I mean, the number of stores and restaurants and even a private Christian school that had been built in Amman to cater to the needs of missionaries. And then you had missionaries coming to Amman to work with the missionaries. Like, this is
Oh yeah,
starting to
that's
be
another whole thing. That's the member care, the missionaries to the missionaries. It's a whole
this
pyramid
is
scheme.
starting to be ridiculous. But
It is starting to be ridiculous.
then you go out to the refugee camps and, you see the Syrian refugees. And I remember talking to this one Syrian mother who had drugged her children so that they could flee
Mm,
without getting caught.
mm,
And, hearing those stories, meeting these people. And then you go back to the missionary culture where they're all like driving SUVs. It was really, really hard to not feel at least a little bit cynical about where's all this Lottie Moon money going to? Like the sacrificial giving that so many people are doing, it's not going where people think it's going, right?
Yeah, well, it's I talk about this in my book, like it's a very expensive model, okay, to especially in an era where Christianity is global. Like there's even in these countries that are predominantly Muslim, like there are indigenous Christians, pretty much everywhere at this point. And not only that, but you have like mass media, you have all kinds of platforms and ways, the internet, the internet's kind of a thing. It's been around, it's very powerful. There's lots of different ways that you can, sort of if you're spread the news of Jesus around the world. There's lots of different platforms. Um, and sending, and human to human contact has always been, a very powerful thing, but you don't even need Americans at this point. Again, you could cultivate indigenous and equip and fund and pay like indigenous Christians, but to send to train and send and like
Just to
an
put them through
entire
language school.
you go through language
Just
an
literally.
entire American family whose standard of and to approximate because they don't live in mud huts, people. Some of them do, but very few. They basically try to approximate a Western, a humble Western standard of living, but a Western standard of living. They have to have medical insurance. You have to pay them enough, so often their kids' college is paid for. And then these days, not when I was growing up, but these days, a lot of these families have a kabillion children. I mean, like they'll have like 6, 8 children. And so, because that's, a thing now in evangelicalism, is having these large families. So it is incredibly expensive. And then, like you said, there's all of this infrastructure to support the missionaries now. So one of the things I've seen in the last 20 years or so is, there's growing awareness about, the psychological, mental health, and the needs of missionary families. Like, this is a stressful lifestyle. The children were ignored for a long time. That's my book is about all of their, issues that they've had and continue to have. Um, now there's an entire infrastructure that has grown up to support the missionaries. Okay, so there's
Yeah.
literally missionaries to the missionaries.
Yeah.
And then there's schools and, administration stuff, and it does get kind of absurd. And it's like, why don't you just hire some, and especially in places like sub-Saharan Africa, like, okay, like a country like Kenya, which is incredibly devout. Not only that, but it has very strong human capacity. Like there's a large class now of well-educated, you know, people with skills. They have a whole tech industry. Like you don't need, even for your administrative needs or whatever, like you do not need an American, period.
Yeah.
But they still have missionaries in Kenya and in some of these countries that are far more devout than the United States. And so it just gets it's definitely, there's an absurdity about it. Hmm.
Yeah, well, I remember hearing, some of I knew quite a few missionaries in Jordan, and hearing the stories about how, the Jordanian government started to kick out all of the missionaries, I think, in the early 2000s, and my understanding is that this is when George Bush was president. He actually got on the phone with King Abdullah and said, "If you wanna continue receiving foreign aid, you better let the missionaries stay there." I don't know if that's true or not, but that story definitely circulated among expats who lived in Jordan. And when you think about that, that just hits me a little bit differently as I get older. But also when you consider that this is one of the most water poor countries in the world. Do we really need a massive influx of Americans who have very high demand for water? And many of these Americans who are coming in are Christian Zionists. And in a country like Jordan, which has the highest Palestinian population in the world, even before the current atrocities occurring in Gaza and the West Bank. I mean, first off, these atrocities have been going on for decades. It's just the scale of what's happening right now and the level of international attention that's finally being paid to it that's different. But th- the most Palestinians in the world live in Jordan. And um, when you have this huge influx of Americans who are basically determining what American foreign policy is going to look like to that country because like their presence, the government's willingness to let them stay in the country is going to determine whether or not they get foreign aid. And again, I don't know if that's true. That's just a story that was circulated. Um, but then also that there is such a dearth of water. There is not enough water. And then you add in all of these refugees who are coming in. And then so many of these Americans who came in were Christian Zionists. Like that is so destabilizing when people literally come from the airport wearing Israeli pins on and they're flying into the Queen Alia airport with Israeli pins on their shirts. Um, that's extremely problematic, right? Especially when your taxi driver, there's a 90% chance that he's Palestinian.
Yeah, I mean, I think Americans, we always bring with us wherever we go, all kinds of geopolitical and cultural baggage. The US is the sort of gravitational center of the universe. Like we have this gravitational pull. So, this is what I always say, like even when you have missionaries who sort of go into situations from a good, humble posture and they're actually trying to sort of establish mutual relationships and maybe live on the level of people and sort of and sort of not bring all their baggage they just it's sort of inherent in just who we are as we go in Americans. The other thing that we just had this missionary in Niger that was kidnapped and freed, and I'm glad he was freed. But in some places, American missionaries are they stand out like a sore thumb, and they're in places where the security is not that great. And yeah, now in his case, he was kidnapped in a city, so I don't want to victim. I don't ever want to victim blame, but some of missionaries go to places where they really have no business being, and then they do get kidnapped, and then that becomes like the US government is then obligated to go and try to, get them out, and that becomes a huge, military, diplomatic endeavor too. So, you can't I think anybody who's gonna go as a missionary, you're not just going as, like, Holly or Keri or whatever, like, you bring with you, like, a lot of accoutrements,
Yeah.
cultural
You
and
go in as a
political.
US citizen.
That's right. And that comes with a lot of it comes with a lot of for you as an individual, it's great. Like it comes with a lot of protections. But if you're going in a capacity where your goal is to establish, mutual relations and like, that authentic human relationship, it's a barrier. I think it's definitely a barrier. And it certainly just as in terms of cost effectiveness, it's not a good model, like to send an entire American family. I almost think the Mormons, and again, I'm not endorsing Mormonism at all, one way or the other, and I know there's problems with their missionary system, but I almost think their model of missions is better. Like, they go, they get the experience, they get the sort of worldview or whatever, but they're sending young single people who are kind of, travel light, so to speak, if an
Mhm,
American overseas can travel light. Certainly from a cost perspective. Now, I know
mhm.
I've heard all kinds of horror stories with regards to Mormon missionaries being endangered, and especially the women, blah blah blah. But comparatively speaking, if you're talking about cost effectiveness, it's just it's a better model than sending an entire, like, massive Brady Bunch family, so,
Yeah,
um
yeah, and then are they actually exporting Bill Gothard's teachings to other
well,
countries?
that's another thing too. I mean, I think my experience with missionaries, again, in my circles, is most of them are not of that type. I would say as a class, the evangelical missionaries I know are more sort of liberal and enlightened than the average American evangelical, but there are all kinds out there, and I certainly know very MAGA missionaries. I was really, just horrified and dismayed, for instance, after in the early days of the Trump administration when they shut down USAID, to see
Mhm.
friends of mine who are missionaries in Africa and literally have seen the work of USAID and repeating some of the lies about it. Like it's all LGBTQ. And it's like, that that's not true. And
Yeah,
so
I
it's
was,
like,
pretty horrified when I was starting to do some of the research for American Dominion, which a huge portion of the content is about the New Apostolic Reformation, which is a global movement. It has always
yeah.
been a global movement, no matter what Matthew Taylor wants to say. This thing was global before C. Peter Wagner. Um, the extent to which these pastors have talked about the World Food Program in demonic terms. I have written grants to have World Food Program distribution sites set up in Yemen, okay, in Houthi occupied territory. And to hear these individuals talking about the World Food Program as if it is a demonic conspiracy, when I know that it has saved the lives of children who are on the brink of death from starvation, is just horrifying. It
Yeah.
is beyond horrifying to
It's
me.
outrageous. It's totally outrageous. But you know what it is, Carrie, is they have and I don't, and I feel like this applies to, a wide spectrum of sort of evangelicalism, not just the fringies. But when you sort of approach when your worldview is basically contingent on, my beliefs are the correct thing. Like this is my epistemological centerpiece, and everything has to sort of fit into that. um, then when you travel and and you're having new experiences and you're seeing more parts of the world, that doesn't tend to then change your viewpoints, because
Mhm.
instead are shoving it into this filter that you come and that you're not compromising on. And so therefore, it actually can have the opposite effect where your priors, the new experiences are worked in and end up confirming your sort of priors. So
Oh, yeah.
and I've
Confirmation
seen that. Yeah,
bias.
I've seen that many times with missionaries. And then the other thing is these days with the internet and all of that is you can go move to another country and never leave your informational bubble. Like you bring it with you with your computer. Like you can still be getting all your information, and you might exceed, and then most missionaries live in kind of a bubble. They're like you described. They have their little neighborhoods and their compounds, and they send their kids to their schools, and a lot of them kind of live in this bubble. So you can easily go as a missionary and you know and I'm not saying that this is true of everyone, that it doesn't change them, but you can easily not change at all from that experience and not have any of your views changed. So
Mhm. Yeah, well, if you no longer have to interact with your neighbors, it does make such a difference, and maybe your neighbors are, Muslim Jordanians, and that's fine. You moved to a Muslim country called Jordan, or at least I did for a couple of years. That it's kind of the expectation that those are gonna be your neighbors, but, I had to get on the phone with customer service this morning, and, of course, I was speaking to somebody in another country, and, of course, it was frustrating and probably raised my blood pressure 20 points, and I left that call thinking, "We really need to get back to just interacting with our neighbors." right? Like, when customer service is in another country, there is no accountability in these neighbor to neighbor interactions that used to be so much of the backbone of how we just lived our lives. Um, Even when I was a kid in the 90s, you talk to your neighbors, and we don't
Yeah.
you don't need to do that anymore, and the
Mhm,
fact that you
mhm.
can go live in another country and never encounter foreigners, locals, right? You can live there as a foreigner and never encounter. I knew a couple who had been in Jordan for 25 years and had never even bothered to learn more than 2 words in Arabic.
That's crazy.
Isn't that just bananas?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was absolutely, like, I felt like that was so ridiculous, and so many people felt like it was normal because they had gone there to work at a missionary school. They hadn't gone there for the Jordanians, they'd gone there for the missionaries. So they
Mhm, mhm.
there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is, yeah, that's an absurdity. But back to your original question, I think it's a complex. The relationship between governments and missionaries is really a patchwork, and it depends a lot on the country. But in certainly in my experience in sub-Saharan Africa, it's sometimes I would say it's a too cordial relationship, in that the missionaries, to their in their defense, like, you're in a precarious situation because you're living in a country under a government that's letting you be there and could kick you out at any time because that's their country. But at the same time, you may be observing and, gross injustices, to even your church members from the government. And so, it can be a tough needle to thread. And so sometimes, missionaries, and certainly in the colonial times, their relationship with the colonial government, and it was a similar dynamic. Sometimes the missionaries were purposefully, supporting the colonial government. I think in most cases it was more of an uncomfortable relationship. They were sort of riding the coattails of the colonial government, but they had their own agenda. But nonetheless, their proximity to colonial governments, kind of made missionaries complicit in a way, and that happens in post-colonial situations and as well. Again, the president of Kenya, when I was growing up, definitely wanted the moral credibility that hanging out with missionaries gave him. He wanted that sort of, stamp of approval, and they didn't want it. They weren't there to give that to him, but they sort of, what could they do? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So it's a complicated relationship, and it does vary by country,
Yeah.
for sure.
I hinted at that some in American Dominion because I have some in here about how there's a component of nation building among Dominionist missionaries, especially with YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission and is now the largest missionary sending organization in the world. Where Lauren Cunningham, especially in the 1980s, was talking very explicitly about working with heads of state and uh, wanting to shape policies, and this being part of his theology that became embedded into YWAM. And yeah, there is that uncomfortable relationship because they are in this country at the mercy of the government of that that's not just the American government, but this other country's government. And you do have some missionaries historically who have worked against cultural practices, like with William Carey and the practice of widow burning, the sati, I think is what it was called. And
Yeah,
he is credited, I don't know the extent to which the story is true, but he is credited with at least beginning to do away with this process or with this cultural norm of widow burning. Whenever
yeah,
the husband dies, the widow is expected to cast herself on the funeral pyre and burn herself to death.
yeah,
Um, but that is, when you have it baked into the missionary model with an organization like YWAM. And the challenge here is that YWAM heavily recruits from the local population. And so there is more of that social capital, that buy-in that they're able to get from working with locals, not just bringing in foreigners. But
Yeah.
it's definitely really concerning in how this model is being used to implement things like the Seven Mountain Mandate in not just in America, but in other countries. But
Yeah, I
let's
would say the bigger through line from like the American context to the mission field is this focus on the spiritual trumping any sort of like the sort of ignoring injustices, as opposed to attaining power and influence and spiritual, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So
that makes a
like
lot of sense.
and I see this in Africa as well, where, I think Christians, they are politically engaged. I think on the whole, it's better than Americans, because in America, it just so happens all the evangelicals are in one political party, so that makes everything they do kind of more political. In Africa, it's cross-cutting. The government's usually run by a Christian, the opposition's a Christian, so it's kind of cuts across that. And so you do have a better track record, I think, of sort of speaking out for peacekeeping, doing a lot of peacekeeping stuff. But in terms of confronting governmental injustice, that's not usually something you see, and that either here nor there, I feel like
Right,
that's kind
but
of a through line.
Lauren Cunningham wasn't necessarily concerned about
No,
confronting
that's what
government
I'm saying. It's
injustice.
like
It was
power's
about
fine.
access to power.
Yes. No, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like confronting power, that sort of tradition of not confronting injustice, you get power, but you're not necessarily confronting injustice. What is that power for? You're looking to get power to sort of spread your version of your faith. You're not looking to get that power so you can fight for the oppressed and things like that.
Right, and again, if we just look at the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness, are you actually being effective in what you do regardless of how much it costs? So many of these humanitarian problems, like, if you have an overly Christianized country like Kenya or Rwanda or Uganda, and we keep sending in missionaries, many of them are doing humanitarian work, but what if we could actually reduce the need for sending foreign humanitarian workers that are calling themselves missionaries by addressing the governmental corruption that is leading to things like mass starvation? And we
Yeah.
can't do when our model is built on having to appease the government in order to let the missionary stay in the country. We don't have that. We lose the ability to speak truth to power when we need something, like when we need access to power in order
Sure.
to be able to stay in the country in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
that's for sure.
let's talk
Okay, yeah.
about an international phenomenon that is the probably the greatest reason why people around the world are converting to Christianity. When I say Christianity, I'm referring to a particular form of Christianity, recognizing that this is a very diverse religion, and that is Alpha Course. So
Yeah,
what?
so I want a story for you.
All right,
And
let's
I
hear it.
and you can the Alpha course is part of it. So a couple of years ago, I wrote a Substack about this. So those of you who have been anybody who's been reading my Substack for a while, you probably remember this. So a few years ago, I got linked up with a group called the Forum. And have you heard of the Forum?
Tell me what the forum is.
Yeah.
I might have heard of
Okay.
it, but it's
Yeah.
not ringing a bell
So
to me.
supposedly it's not explicitly Christian evangelical, but I'll get to that.
It is.
In practice, it tends to be. So it was billed to me as like it was this British couple, Philippa Stroud. She's a member of the House of Lords, and she's married to an evangelical British pastor, David Stroud, who's also, I believe, he's the head of Alpha, if I'm not mistaken, or someone very high up in Alpha. And he's also the pastor of a very large evangelical church in London. I should say she's a conservative member of the House of Lords. And so they started this sort of supper club in the United States called the Forum. And the idea was like, convening people of influence and integrity to, basically elevate society and exchange ideas and blah, 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 blah. So I got invited to this through friend of a friend kind of thing. And I was like, as changing careers, I thought it would be a good networking thing. And the speakers, these gatherings were about, I would say like 100 people. And then they always had some super high powered speaker, like David Brooks was one of them. And I got to meet David Brooks, and that was exciting. And then like Albert Brooks, unrelated, the Oprah friend, he was one of them. Anyway, and so I went to several of these dinners, and I just something was just off. Like, I couldn't quite pinpoint it because there was nothing just objectively wrong. I ran into some people I knew from other circles. It was clear, like, it was a heavy contingent of what I call the Wheaton crowd, the Wheaton evangelicals, the high-minded, like, probably not Trumpy, but in some cases, like, Trump tolerant, or certainly not as Trump outraged. Not MAGA, but, you know, a
Adjacent.
spectrum of comfort with MAGA,
Mhm.
anyway, I call it the Wheaton crowd. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're
Um,
talking about.
and
The
so,
Francis Schaefers.
yeah, so it was like these, and again, I ran into people I know because I used to go to a PCA church here in DC, and, lots of well-connected people there. Now I'm a liberal, now I'm a full-blown heretical liberal, but that's another whole story. And
Me too.
so something was just like kind of, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it was like, I don't know, like these people, they're not MAGA, but they're not clear. Like, I don't know. I couldn't quite place these people and the Strouds in particular. And then one time, um, I went to the supper club, and the Strouds had shown up with Jordan Peterson. You know
Oh,
Jordan Peter, yeah.
yeah.
And now I knew that name, and that was like a red flag. I was like, "What is going on? Like, why is Jordan Peterson here?" And I said to one of the women I had, sort of befriended a little bit, I was like, I'm like, "I have a problem with this. This is not okay. Like, I don't wanna be
This
at a
is not
dinner
what I
with."
thought I signed up for.
Yeah, this I don't wanna be at a dinner with Jordan Peterson. This is not. And she was just kinda like, "Yeah, he's kind of," but she didn't seem like otherwise, like, horribly alarmed. Well, then I get this email from the Strouds. I don't think it was sent just to me, but it was like extending a personal invitation to this conference in London, and the name of the organization was, and it slips my mind, but it was basically like, again, they made clear, like, this is not affiliated with the forum, but it's the type of thing that people in the forum would be interested in, and so we're extending you a personal invitation. So I went to that website, and again, I wish I could remember the name. It's in the article I wrote on my Substack. Um, and looked at, of course, the Strouds were on the board, Jordan Peterson was on the board, but then all kinds of other, like, some decent people, and some like really noxious people like Jordan Peterson. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, is on the board. Mike
Oh,
Lee, another election denier, is on the board. That
yeah, so this is
Dan Crenshaw is on the board, and then there's like,
not what you signed up for.
yeah, and then there was, like, some more palatable people, but I was, like, horrified. I was like, so I wrote them back and I said, "I don't see how affiliating with," and I named the names and I explained, "How does this fit with the forum's because they had this whole, like, set of principles, like, of the forum. I was like, "I don't see how this aligns with the principles of the forum." Like, I affiliate with and who's even remotely anti-democratic, and these several of these people are, and so therefore I can't participate in the forum even more. And I just got this bland note back like, "Oh, we're so sorry you feel that way, we've enjoyed our time with you." um but it just so then it got me like, I don't know what the so, but I'm just like, and I'm thinking about David Brooks. By the way, at the dinner with Jordan Peterson, David Brooks was there. He was sitting next to Jordan Peterson, and I'm like, I don't. think David Brooks and Jordan Peterson are of the same. I wouldn't. You can. I have some issues with David Brooks, but I wouldn't put him in the same category. So it's like, what's going on here? Like, are they trying to like straddle some sort of fence? Are they trying to sort of be? Are they trying to sort of sell this noxious ideology to in a palatable package to the respectable types, or the most sympathetic interpretation I would have is, are they trying to sort of reach the wayward Christians? It became pretty clear that obviously there was a heavy Christian undertone to the whole thing. Are they trying to sort of rescue these wayward Christians and sort of bring them back into the fold? Like, what is going on here? And I've yet to figure it out. I don't know what they're. I didn't know what to make of these people or the whole scene, and so I don't know what you make of that. I have not. I'm just dumping this story
I
on
have some
Keri for the first
thoughts.
time.
I have some thoughts, but I don't wanna speculate out loud. Um,
Well,
but
just like
so
you're based on what you know of the British evangelical scene, which has got to be more than what I know. Like, what do you make of the whole thing, of the
um,
Strouds?
I really couldn't tell you about the Strouds in particular. I will just say that I am very interested in Holy Trinity Brompton, which is the Anglican diocese in London that is the purveyor of the Alpha Course, which she said that the Strouds are the
I
leaders.
know he's somewhere. I don't know what he's got some connection to Alpha. I know that.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll just say that I'm very interested in Holy Trinity Brompton. And I think it's worth exploring, with its connections to places of power. It has very good relations with with previous archbishops of Canterbury. I haven't looked into the current archbishop. I believe that she is LGBTQ, and I might be mistaken. I hope nobody quotes me on that. I know that she's a woman, the current archbishop. And
Oh
there's
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
don't know if she's LGBTQ. I didn't know. I
mm,
didn't think so, but
I
I
think that's
know
a
she's.
criticism that I read, but I don't know if it's true, and if it is true, I wouldn't consider it a criticism at all. Um, I know that I've read somewhere, like, a critique that, she's a queer clergy woman, and if she is, who cares, right? But I'm more interested in the connections that they have to individuals like previous archbishops of Canterbury, which, they are in the House of Lords, and how this affects not only the trajectory of the Anglican Church, but trajectory in other aspects of British public life.
Yeah, so David, I know he's not an Anglican pastor. It's an evangelical church that he's a pastor of. But the Anglican, yeah, the sort of
There's a lot
established
of
church dynamic, isn't
evangelicals
it?
with a lot of evangelicals in the Anglican Church, and there's my understanding is that
Interesting.
there's not enough Anglican, like, what we would call mainline or progressive Anglicans. There's not enough of them that are studying for, positions in the clergy, and so they're actually recruiting a lot of evangelical
Huh.
leaders into the
Well,
Anglican
that
Church.
could change things a lot, like, wow. Okay. Fascinating. Um,
I'm by no means an expert on that. I definitely want to learn more, and I'm kind of kicking myself right now for bringing up that the current archbishop, like, there is like, I just wanna be clear, there's a
well, I
criticism.
know they are not happy with her being a woman in Africa.
Right, right.
That's I would kind of the reason I say I don't think she's LGBTQ is because honestly, in Africa, like her being a woman is bad enough. They would not be able to like she just went. I think she went to Africa recently and was fairly well received. But it's like it
The
would be a
youth access
much bigger
system, yeah.
deal. It was be a much bigger deal if she was LGBTQ, but I don't know. But, can
Yeah,
you tell me more
it's
about
definitely a
Alpha? Like,
criticism.
what is I know it's, like, kind of a curriculum. What is it exactly?
Okay, so she has a nuanced stance on
Uh-huh.
LGBTQ plus inclusion. So she's not just anti-queer the way that evangelicals might want leaders to be.
But see,
So
I don't think of the Anglican Church. I think of the Anglican Church as quite liberal. So this is news to me that I mean, I know in Africa it's not, but I mean in the England, I think of it as pretty liberal.
yeah, so my understanding, just based on the limited information that I have read, we know that there's a phenomenon in UK throughout Europe of churches closing due to low enrollment. There's a lot of what are called redundant churches in the UK, which means that their membership rolls got so low that it no longer made any financial sense to continue operating them. You had churches falling into disrepair because there were just no funds for the upkeep of a building that could seat 1,000 people and you only have 50 coming, right? So this has been going on for decades in places like England. This is not a new phenomenon. And then you have Holy Trinity Brompton that began um, exploring charismatic theology. They brought in John Wimber. John Wimber was a huge influence on their church. And this would have been about the same time that they were developing and starting to really promote the Alpha course. And they got a lot of people coming. There's a it is I haven't visited it. I'm gonna be in London next month. I plan to visit Holy Trinity Brompton. My understanding is that it is a thriving congregation, which is an anomaly within the Church of England where you have dying congregations that are the norm and church buildings that are now just historical artifacts and sometimes being repurposed for other use, like for storing records. And but you have this church that is thriving. It has a significant immigrant population in the congregation. It's really attracting a very diverse crowd of people. And so that has attracted the attention of the higher ups in the Anglican Church who see this as really the way forward. Do we want the Church of England to just die out? Or do we want to revitalize it, start doing something like same old message, but new delivery techniques. And in the process, revitalize the church instead of seeing the church close entirely.
So what is Alpha exactly? It's a course, but what is the sort of centerpiece of it? Um,
I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm taking an alpha course right now.
oh,
And Um, first of all, I'm gonna say that I should be more impressed that I am. The guy who is on all of the videos for Alpha Course, the guy named Nicky Gumbel, he was the vicar, I believe, of Holy Trinity Brompton for a number of years and did more than just about anyone to promote and spread Alpha Course. He attended Oxford and Cambridge, cites extensively from C.S. Lewis, who attended Oxford and then became a professor there. You have on the videos, they show individuals like Alistair McGrath. And like these are smart dudes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the Wheaton crowd of England.
Yeah, kind of the Wheaton crowd of England, more with Cliff College, I believe, of Oxford, which is like the kind of the evangelical light training center of Oxford. And you're seeing, um, them quoting these, like, really intellectual figures from very respected institutions, but then the focus is all on, like, this is supposed to be just heart knowledge. This is supposed to be about your experience with God. Head knowledge doesn't matter. And I'm like, "Wait. There's a huge disconnect here. This is not actually making any sense." Or, like, I don't understand why you're having C.S. Lewis quotes and having videos of Alistair McGrath talking about apologetics, but it's supposed to be just about what you call hard knowledge. So I'm just going to say that I'm not impressed with Alpha
Huh.
Course.
I don't have any experience with it, but
Take one.
yeah, interesting. Well, I
I'm going tomorrow night. You want to come down to Texas and join me?
is it in person? No, is it online or what? It's in
No,
person
it's in
or
person. It's in
really?
person. Yep.
So is it? What is it? What is it? Is it through a church there then, or
Yeah, so churches anywhere in the world can host Alpha Course. You just have to have a trained leader who is going through all the materials. They have a pretty strict set of materials that you're supposed to abide by, pretty strict discussion topics that you're supposed to stick with. So it feels like it should be because the focus is on experience and heart knowledge, it feels like you're supposed to have more flexibility to talk about things that really matter to you, but they're also just really canned presentations like what is the meaning of life? And the meaning of life is supposed to be God. But my favorite one last week was who is Jesus? They never actually answered who is Jesus. They just had all of these apologists on a video give historical verification that Jesus was actually a human who lived in a historical period. Didn't actually answer the question of who he was.
so it's
So
basically high level, like it's meant to sort of reach the intellectual class with like, reach the intellectual with evangelical sort of
kind
faith
of
or
feels like
whatever.
that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also very populist and is expanding not not so much among evangelicals, but among in charismatic churches or even charismatic light churches. They might not be, I feel like nowadays if we say charismatic churches, there is the immediate implication of the New Apostolic Reformation. But no, there's plenty of charismatic light churches that they're not NAR, but they use Bethel music, right?
Yeah.
Um, and these are the churches that are really growing right now. They might be small congregations of 2, 300 people, but they're also thriving.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I anyway, I'm gonna send you this article I wrote, about this experience because it was just I don't know, like, I don't again, some of the people I met were very nice. Some of the people I know from before who were there, were are nice people. But I just had this, like, kind of that creepy feeling when, like, you have this sense of, like, there's something going on that's not exactly the same as what is being presented, do you know?
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
that's the feeling I had the whole time, and it's like, maybe what's going on isn't that nefarious, but I don't know, but it's like,
But
the
why is
fact
something being hidden?
that's right, like, the fact that there's I don't know. Yeah, I was unsettled by the experience, I'll just say that. Maybe it's my, Trump derangement syndrome where, any drop of
Really got to get
MAGA, like, I break out in hives, you know?
really got to get
That
that checked.
that's that's one of my frustrations with the Wheaton class. Some of them are really strongly anti-Trump, I would say, but there's a bigger spectrum that are just sort of like the bulwark people call them anti-Trumps. Like they're anti-Trump. They're anti-Trump, but they're also anti the people that are just so militant about Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying? They kind of want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to, like, sort of, not be in favor of Trump, but then also not ask any hard questions about white evangelicalism and how, like, and or or even Christian nationalism, where it's like, they remain apologists for the sort of white evangelical, and they don't want to they don't want to acknowledge any connections between, the sort of hardcore Christian nationalism and the more palatable, like, respectable evangelicalism. I find them frustrating. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in American Dominion, I looked at the intellectual godfather of the Wheaton crowd would be Francis Schaeffer,
mm,
and he he studied under the same professor that taught Rushdoony, and Schaeffer was really into Rushdoony. He didn't embrace all of Rushdoony's ideas, but he worked with some of Rushdoony's associates.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And so, like, I'm sorry, but the intellectual distance is not as great as we might want to think it is.
Well, anyway, I don't think it's great at all, and that's one of my I was more on the sort of before the 2024 election, I was more on the train of like white, just burn white evangelicalism to the ground and like take no prisoners. And then since the election, now I'm kind of like, well, the ones that are anti-Trump, like maybe just let them ride for now. I'll come back to you later, kind of thing. But I can't shake. I mean, my overall hill that I die on at the end of the day is like to me, and I'm a historian, so there's a pretty straight line from like white Southern pro-slavery Christianity all the way to current. And I'm not talking about the fringy stuff that you study. I'm talking about
I
mainstream
read
white
about that in here. This is
evangelical.
the book about Jerry Falwell. Yeah, this one's based on my doctoral
Is that your
thesis.
book?
I spent 3 years with Jerry Falwell, and, you know, senior guy. Yeah, the one
Like
who Oh, no,
before he
he
died?
died in 2007.
Oh,
Oh,
okay. I thought you
was
meant like you actually
David Gushee wrote the review of End Time Politics for Christian Century, and he started out by saying Keri Ladner spent hours and hours in the Jerry Falwell archives and spared all of us the agony of having to do so ourselves.
before Jerry Fall. Yeah, think that to need to take and they're not be some of them are some more even in my book. I don't. I'd even take a negative review in Christianity Today. He offered to let, and then they rescinded that offer because I was
Oh.
too.
Hey, we should get together and write an
So
article
so
about the
anyway,
Infidels
I
and send it to Christianity. So, yeah, okay.
that at all. Yeah, no, I know what about VeggieTales, but like I don't want them any them even if it. And I like Phil Vischer. I like the Holy Post people. Um, but
You missed out.
both
You
ways. It
missed
was right in
out.
between me and my kids.
You missed out. W
Seems like a seems like good.
how on earth have you gotten through the stress of the Trump years without God is bigger than the boogeyman? It's a VeggieTales song.
Is
Yeah,
yeah.
God is bigger than the boogeyman. You're gonna have to
To that.
look at this.
Oh,
That's probably a good
okay.
place to end.
All right. God, evangelical God. My own. Um, but your brain is thing to behold
I
every time we
appreciate
have a
that. So, you're not impressed by my heart knowledge or lack thereof? I have no
there.
heart. I only
I
Okay,
think
I appreciate that.
yeah, but no,
Well, hey, again sometime.
yeah,
Let's do it again sometime.
anytime you organize, I just,
Yeah. All right. Well, you have a good one, Holly. It was nice talking to
please.
you. Bye. I will
You
try.
too. If I don't talk